The next song is called Went Out Last Night, and it will be sung by John Danks. And in it, he gives an outline of some of the events that took place around the time of the murder of Polly Button. Originally from the nearby village of Astley, John Danks, variously listed as a labourer, agricultural labourer or hedge carpenter, was the fifth man to father a child with Polly Button. He had settled with his family in Abbey Street, Nuneaton. When his wife died in 1821, he was left with 2 teenage children. However, it took only a few months to find a partner for himself and a mother for his children, as on the 12th of May, 1822, he married Jane Floyd, a widow of less than 3 years, in Nuneaton's parish church. The marriage was to be childless, as Floyd's first marriage had been. It became evident at the trial of John Danks that he had been living near to Polly Button in Abbey Street and had begun a relationship with her. They may well have met at their local pub, perhaps the nearby Wheatsheaf Inn. Whatever the reason for the liaison, it was in late 1828 or early 1829 that Polly Button became pregnant again for the 5th time, and on the 21st of September 1829, her daughter Jane was born. John Danks was adjudged to be the father of the child and required to pay the costs and maintenance for the child. Evidence given at the murder trial indicated that Danks and Polly Button had continued to have an ongoing relationship after Jane had been born, with witnesses confirming that they had seen the pair going for walks together over the Burgage fields towards Astley's Barn, which is in present-day St Mary's Road, or was in present-day St Mary's Road. Living in such close proximity resulted in evident antipathy between Polly and Danks' wife, Jane. Arguments between Danks, his wife, and Polly Button were widely known about in the neighbourhood and were commented on by witnesses at the trial. It is also possible that Jane Danks' dislike might well have been made worse when Polly Button actually named her 5th child, if you think about it, Jane, perhaps rubbing salt into the wound of Polly's continuing relationship with her husband. The fateful consequence of the continuing liaison with Danks was that she became pregnant again for the 6th time in the autumn of 1831. Fearful of her family's situation in the increasingly dire economic circumstances affecting Nuneaton at the time, she sought affiliation order against Danks in relation to that unborn child. A warrant for bastardy before birth was subsequently granted on the 31st of January 1832, and that warrant required Danks to be brought in front of the justices. Less than 2 weeks later, the justices were in action again regarding Danks. The overseers of the poor for Nuneaton had got back to the office, so to speak, at that earlier meeting, and realised that Danks hadn't been paying the maintenance that had been due for Jane. In fact, it looks as if he hadn't been paying that maintenance for almost 1 year. And if you think about it, the chaos that had enveloped Nuneaton's poor law system in the years leading up to 1831-32, they're detailed in the book, but it was a catastrophic collapse in Nuneaton, where there was a 200% increase in people on the poor law. It would appear that Danks' non-payment just had been missed. They must have been overwhelmed by the difficulties that had been faced by the town. So he had a warrant issued for disobeying that order of filiation, and that there was a warrant for him to be brought before the justices to answer the complaint of the parish officials. This must have thrown Danks, and that warrant, I should mention, I've just got it written down here, that was issued on the 11th of February 1832, so that's 1 week before he attacked Polly Button. So he must have been in a terrible panic, with the industrial and economic collapse in Nuneaton at that time wreaking havoc and leading to the destitution in the town. He must have felt that his situation was helpless, as he possessed little, if any, means to pay the significant debt that had built up. On Saturday the 18th of February 1832, John Danks went out for a walk on a calm, cold evening underneath a clear sky full of stars and an almost full moon. He took a rather circuitous route over the burgage fields to a barn that he and Polly Button used to frequent, known as Astley's Hovel. Having checked that the barn and its approaches were clear, he then called on Polly Button at her house in Upper Abbey Street to go out with him for a walk, most likely to see if he could find some way of delaying these maintenance payments which had been thrown up. They were in the barn for about 15 minutes, their argument becoming increasingly animated, angry, and then physical. Polly's increasing distress must have become extreme, with one witness, a Mrs. Hammond, hearing her cries of alarm from more than 600 yards away. Danks had knocked her to the ground with a right hook to her left temple. Using a pocket knife that he had brought with him, he slashed at her throat. In court, Danks is quoted as saying that he had fallen quickly on top of her back and cut her once. This was a relatively superficial cut, just 2 inches above the collarbone. Danks recalled that she had hooted very loudly, so he had cut her a second time and stopped her hooting. The mortal wound that killed Polly Button was a cut 7 inches long and 3 inches deep that severed all the main blood vessels on the left-hand side of her throat. The song Went Out Last Night will now be performed by John Danks.
Last night to walk a while, met poor Polly who was with child. She gave me grief and she gave me strife. I stopped her hooting with a pocket knife. I stopped her hooting with a pocket knife. Began to think of what a deed I'd done. I ditched that knife and away I run. I ran straight home and I went to bed. No more trouble from Polly, I said. No more trouble from Polly, I said. Early next morning, about 8:30, they found her body by a 4-bar gate. They put her on a door and they carried her home, for all the little children to weep and moan. For all the little children to weep and moan. Constable hadn't caught up with me. Quickly took me into custody. We walked to prison and I waved my hat. If she's been killed, I know nothing of that. If she's been killed, I know nothing of that. Well, they put me on a cart and they drove me through town. Everyone stared as the rain came down. They found me guilty as I knew they would. Never could wash away all of that blood. Never could wash away all of that blood. Well, the judge and the jury, they took their stand. The judge had a paper in his right hand. May the Lord have mercy on a poor girl's soul. St. Mary's bell began to toll. St. Mary's bell began to toll. Went out last night to walk a while. I met poor Polly who was with child. She gave me grief and she gave me strife. I stopped her hootin' with a pocket knife. I stopped her hootin'.